Now, camps in the Kruger National Park are closing before Tropical Cyclone Eloise hits. Earlier, we brought you the incredible visuals of what's coming out of Mozambique's cars submerged, roofs blown off, huge poles, huge broadcast signs knocked over. And of course, we heard the warning from the Weather Service earlier that this is potentially fatal for people in parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. To discuss, we're joined tonight by the spokesperson for SANParks, because those camps in the Kruger National Park closing down. That's Phaahla. Mr. Phaahla, before we go to that, I understand that you knew Jonas Gwangwa. Our condolences to you. Can we start off by asking you how you knew him and engaged with him?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good evening to the viewers. Well, and firstly, let me express my sincerest condolences to the Gwangwa family on their loss. But Brajeji, as we used to call him, he was a very humble individual. He was a great artist, a composer, an arranger, and as you heard, a freedom fighter and a very proud patriot of South Africa. You were asking the question about memories. I remember the first time I saw him perform. It was in the 90s when they had just come back from exile, and it was at Kippies. He performed music from Flowers of the Nation, the album, which still remains one of my favorite albums. And he did a great performance, and I've also shared some interviews with him on radio as I was on Metro at that time and looking at jazz specifically. So he leaves a very rich legacy, and will be joining the other luminaries who left before him, and may his soul rest in peace.
Yeah. Does it feel like the end of an era of sorts? Hugh Masekela going 3 years before on this very day, but with him taking so much of that jazz legacy, Sapphire Town in the 50s, before even going in exile?
It definitely is the end of an era. I mean, we only have Brabani, Ratchabane, Stompy is still remaining, and many have left. And from that group that went into exile, Brakefa Semenya is the one that is still remaining. You'll remember they formed a group called Unity of South Africa, and they are the ones who were actually driving that strategy of making music be popularized, and for the struggle to be popularized through music.
Yeah, do you concur with our earlier guests that music was so influential? It wasn't just art for art's sake. It was so influential in changing minds about the apartheid regime in South Africa.
It definitely was, because it offered a platform. It was entertainment, but during that entertainment, then there would be telling stories about the atrocities that were taking place in apartheid South Africa then, and therefore also raising funds, much needed funds for those community that was in exile. So they were activists in their own right.
And finally, I mean, you've touched on it, but we're talking about this giant musician, but many people say sort of dealing with him on a one-on-one basis, a very kind, humble man. Do you concur?
Yes, he was very humble, he was very kind, and also had a good sense of humor, Brajeji, if you were to act with him. And a great performer. I mean, if you saw him on stage, you wouldn't say that it was him at an advanced stage. The last show that I saw him perform was with the late Johnny Magwa, and they were at the Cape Town International Jazz Festival, and they brought the roof down because they were dancing and just having a good time on stage. So it's a great loss for South Africa and a great loss for the arts world.
All right, we appreciate you sharing your memories with us. Let's move now to what's happening in terms of Cyclone Eloise. Maybe fittingly, this incredible storm moving from Mozambique to South Africa. How is it going to affect the Kruger Park?
Well, predictions were that it was expected to hit landfall tomorrow, but as Kruger, we have been very proactive with the guidance of our scientists. They sit on several disaster management committees in both provinces of Limpopo and Mpumalanga, and also at the national level. On the 20th, we had heavy rains in the Pafuri region, and we started by closing off gravel roads, picnic sites, and bushveld camps like Batelier, Chimuwini, and Sireni. We also closed off Sable Heights because there is a danger of flooding there. And guests who had been booked at those satellite camps are going to be accommodated at Mopane and Olifants largely because we thought we would move them to Shingwedzi as well. But we've had some rains and we're preparing for the worst case scenario. So Shingwedzi is currently busy evacuating.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, are all the guests evacuating? There's not a chance of a couple driving around, none the wiser, maybe staying in a remote area or some secluded accommodation. I don't know the setup, but are you sure that all guests will be taken to safety?
All those bushveld camps have been evacuated, and we are evacuating people from Shingwedzi as guests, and we are rounding them up because our disaster management teams include rangers and hospitality services managers. So we do have a network of people that make sure and go through the list of their guests and make sure that those are accounted for and that they are being escorted to the next destination. So there is no danger of us leaving people behind, but we are closely monitoring even those who are on the road. Because some of the roads have become slippery, and especially low-lying bridges are very dangerous because the rains have begun falling now. And we are doing that just to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind or leave anything to chance.
Yeah, and surely the workers and their families are catered for as well and given alternatives.
Yes, they are also being given alternatives. They also will be evacuated. I can just assure people that our air wing, supported by the South African National Defence Force, are also on standby to airlift those who might need to be airlifted.
Finally, just you said the rain is starting to fall. Just tell us how bad it is at the moment. And we spoke to the weather service earlier. It just sounds like we should prepare for something pretty significant here in terms of flooding. Could be potentially fatal. What are you expecting tomorrow?
Well, we hope it doesn't get to that, but the predictions are that by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, then we will start seeing a lot of water flowing through the Limpopo River. At the Shangoni Gate, we are also seeing quite a lot of rain. Punda Maria is experiencing rain. It has started raining in Shingwedzi, but not that heavy. The river is still very low. Remember, we have experienced floods before, and we have put up markers on some of the rivers that we are monitoring constantly, and we're getting updates as we speak.
All right, thank you very much. That was spokesperson for SANParks telling us about parts of the Kruger National Park, some of those camps being evacuated and closed as Cyclone Eloise moves in to South Africa.